New criticism emerged as a literary theory in the United States in the early 20th century and was popular in the 1940s and 1950s. It was a response to the dominant literary theories of the time, which tended to focus on the historical or social context of literary works. New criticism was influenced by a number of intellectual and cultural trends, including formalism, which emphasized the aesthetic qualities of literature, modernism. It rejected traditional forms and celebrated individual creativity, and the rise of scientific thinking, which emphasized analysis and objectivity. The term new criticism was coined in the 1940s by the American literary critic John Crowe Ransom, who was a key figure in the movement. Other prominent new critics included Cleanth Brooks, Penn Warren, Tate, and William Empson. New criticism was characterized by its emphasis on close reading and textual analysis, its rejection of extrinsic factors such as authorial intent or historical context, and its focus on the formal qualities of literary works, such as structure, language, and imagery. They often use techniques such as paradox, ambiguity, irony, and tension to reveal the complexity of a work and its relationship to the reader. There are several key concepts in the new criticism literary movement. Close reading. New criticism emphasizes close reading, or a careful and detailed analysis of a literary text to uncover its underlying meaning and themes. This approach involves examining the text's language, structure, imagery, and other literary devices to reveal its complexities and subtleties. The intentional fallacy. New critics reject the idea that a literary work's meaning can be determined by the author's intentions. They argue that a work should be evaluated on its own terms, rather than on the basis of what the author may have intended. The affective fallacy. New critics also reject the idea that a work's meaning can be determined by its emotional effect on the reader. They argue that a work's value lies in its formal qualities, rather than in any emotional response it may evoke. The heresy of paraphrase. New critics argue that a literary work cannot be reduced to a simple summary or paraphrase. They believe that the complexities and ambiguities of a work are essential to its meaning, and that these cannot be captured in a brief summary. Organic unity. New critics emphasize the idea of organic unity, or the idea that a literary work is a self-contained and integrated whole. They believe that all elements of a work, including its language, structure, and imagery, work together to create a unified and coherent whole. Ambiguity. New critics often looked for ambiguity in literary works, seeing it as a sign of complexity and depth. Irony. New critics saw irony as a powerful literary device that could reveal the complexities of human experience and challenge readers' assumptions. Paradox. New critics were interested in paradox, or seemingly contradictory statements or ideas, as a way of exploring the tensions and contradictions in a literary work. Textual autonomy. New critics believed that a literary work should be considered as a self-contained and independent entity, rather than being interpreted in relation to the author's intentions or the historical context in which it was produced. Formalism. New criticism was influenced by formalism, which emphasized the aesthetic qualities of literature, including form, style, and structure. These concepts were used by new critics to analyze literary works and uncover their meanings and themes. Some of the key figures associated with new criticism include John Crowe Ransom. Ransom was an American poet and critic who is often credited with coining the term new criticism. He was a professor at Kenyon College and was a key figure in the development of the movement. Cleanth Brooks. Brooks was an American literary critic and professor at Louisiana State University. He was known for his influential book, The Well-Wrought Urn, which emphasized the importance of close reading and formal analysis in literary criticism. Penn Warren. Warren was an American poet, novelist, and critic who was associated with the Fugitive Poets, a group of writers who were influential in the development of new criticism. He was also the first poet laureate of the United States. Tate. Tate was an American poet and critic who was also associated with the Fugitive Poets. He was a professor at several universities, including Princeton and the University of Minnesota. William Empson. Empson was a British poet and critic who was associated with the movement known as practical criticism, which emphasized the importance of close reading and textual analysis in literary criticism. His book, 7 Types of Ambiguity, was particularly influential in the development of new criticism. These key figures, along with others associated with new criticism, helped to shape the movement and its emphasis on close reading, formal analysis, and textual autonomy in literary criticism. Some of the questions that a new criticism critic might ask while examining a text include: 1. How does the structure of the work contribute to its meaning and themes? 2. How does the language of the work create meaning and themes? 3. How do the images and symbols in the work contribute to its overall meaning? 4. How does the author use irony or paradox to create meaning and themes? 5. How does the work create a sense of unity or coherence? 6. How does the work use ambiguity to create meaning and themes? 7. How does the work challenge readers' assumptions or expectations? 8. How do the characters in the work contribute to its meaning and themes? 9. How does the work reflect the cultural or historical context in which it was produced? These questions are designed to help the critic focus on the formal qualities of the work and how they contribute to its meaning and themes, rather than on the author's intentions or the historical context in which it was produced. By focusing on the text itself, new criticism aimed to uncover the deeper meanings and themes that could be found within it. While new criticism was influential in literary studies, it has also been criticized for several reasons. Formalist approach. New criticism was criticized for its narrow focus on formal qualities of literature and its disregard for the historical and social contexts in which the work was produced. Critics argue that this approach ignores the larger cultural and political issues that shape a work. Textual autonomy. New criticism's emphasis on textual autonomy has also been criticized for ignoring the role of the author and the reader in shaping the meaning of a work. Critics argue that the meaning of a work is not solely determined by the text itself, but also by the reader's interpretation and the author's intentions. Limited diversity. New criticism was also criticized for its limited diversity and focus on a narrow canon of literature that excluded many voices and perspectives. Critics argue that this approach perpetuated a narrow view of literature that did not reflect the diversity of human experience. Anti-historical bias. New criticism was also criticized for its anti-historical bias, which focused on the text at the expense of historical and cultural context. Critics argue that this approach ignores the ways in which literature is shaped by larger historical and cultural forces. Elitism. New criticism was also criticized for its elitism, which prioritized literature that was seen as high art, and excluded popular and non-Western forms of literature. Critics argue that this approach perpetuated a narrow view of literature that excluded many voices and perspectives. While new criticism was influential in literary studies and helped to shape the discipline, it has also been criticized for its limitations and narrow focus. Critics have called for a more inclusive and diverse approach to literary studies that takes into account the larger historical and cultural contexts in which literature is produced.